Welcome to Which, the Women in Technology Creative Industries Hub, elevating the voices of women in tech. My name is Bishi, the founder of Which. In this podcast, I'll be talking to a woman in tech about her work, journey, life, and process. In this week's episode, I'll be talking to noirish synth wizard Hinako Omori about her solo work and stage work with the likes of Kae Tempest and Ed O'Brien. Please do like, review, and subscribe. We're a new podcast, and every bit of support helps. Hinako, welcome to the Which podcast, Creative Women in Tech. Can you tell me, where did your journey with music begin?
Firstly, thank you so much for having me, Bishi. It's always such a pleasure to see you. My journey with music, I guess it began when I started playing the piano. So I started playing the piano when I was 5. My mum very kindly got me some lessons, and I was learning classical piano at the time. So I guess that's kind of the very beginning of my journey, I guess, yeah. And yeah, I just continued playing, and I still play now, not so much classical, although I very much love classical music. But yeah, that was kind of where it started, in a way.
And what were the first pieces of music to really make a big impact?
I think, do you mean to play or just in general to absorb?
I think to play and to listen to.
Sure. So I loved Chopin. I loved romantic music, and to play is such a joy. Like the idea of, I don't know, yeah, I think the world that he created was just so magical, and is still, to this day, I'm still just fascinated by him and his work. So that would be, so his nocturnes, I think, when I learned them, I was just, yeah, in awe of his magic. But then I think I started getting really into electronic music when I was at college, and I think a big influence for me, and I feel like I always come back to this, that a band that I was just utterly obsessed with was The Knife. I think when I first heard their Deep Cuts album, I was just, yeah, it just took me to somewhere else, because for me, I'd not really heard anything like that before, and I think I had quite an interesting musical upbringing. My parents listened to quite diverse, but very sort of, I don't know what the word is, but yeah, very different genres. It was never like, you know, we grew up listening to one thing or another. So for me, that The Knife really struck a chord. Like it really was very inspirational for me. Is struck a chord a positive thing? I never know that phrase.
It is what, a positive thing?
You know when you say it struck a chord, is that a positive thing?
I think it is. But then I also think that even when you have a strong reaction which is negative, I also tend to see that in a really positive light.
Okay, yeah. Well, I meant it struck a chord it struck a major chord, a very nice positive chord.
That's great. Also, or to be fair, minor chords are pretty good as well. But anyway.
In this context, it was a very positive chord that it struck.
When you were studying music tech at college?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So, yeah.
What was the first synth that you were introduced to?
I think the first synth that synth that I owned was the Korg MS-2000B. That was around the time, I remember really clearly, that the OC came out, and Imogen Heap's song. That's the first time I'd heard Imogen Heap, and what was that song called? The beautiful song with the vocoder.
Speak.
Yeah. The main track that, yeah, I mean...
It's so mean, because Imogen's a friend. Imogen, if you're listening to this, I'm really sorry. I know you're, when you're so immersed in someone's music.
Yeah.
What it's called.
No, I'm such a huge fan, and I can't even use the title of the track. But anyway, that I think that's when I first come across Imogen's music, perhaps. And since then, obviously, I've seen her beautiful show come, so many times, and yeah, really been delving into her work. But that was when I think I was like, I've got this vocoder on this synth, let's try it, and it really helped me sort of get into the ins and outs of the synthesizer a lot more. But that was the first one that I'd played with, I guess. Yeah.
And what music software did you start using at college? Was it Cubase or Logic?
Logic. It was Logic actually. College, yeah, Logic and Sibelius. We did a lot of scoring for our compositions and things like that. So it was mainly Sibelius, but obviously Sibelius, the playback isn't great and it's very MIDI sounding. That's obviously Sibelius is more of a, I guess mainly scoring and not so much of a playback device. But so yeah, we'd score in Sibelius and then work in Logic for the sounds and recording.
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow. And
How about you? What did you started on?
Well, I did some training in Cubase. I got Logic. When I was at Central St. Martin's, I did some, what's the really posh one? I'm sounding Pro Tools. I did some.
Yeah.
Very strangely, I did some Pro Tools at Art College. But yeah, I think that the way the programs have developed, they're so much more user friendly now. To be able to create certain sounds, to be able to create certain sound palettes, to edit in a certain way, you had to have a lot of knowledge before. Whereas everything has become much more user friendly, which I think is a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing, and I'm slowly seeing how Logic is trying to behave like Ableton. Not that that's a bad thing either. But now I use a mixture of Logic and Ableton. I use Ableton for interesting live stuff. But there's something about the functionality of Logic that I just really love it. I mean, I just need to... The only thing that I regret with my journey with music technology is I really managed to convince myself that everything was so hard and that it was beyond my capability, And I think a big part of doing Which is to try and, I don't know, maybe heal that in some way and think, why did I convince myself that this was so difficult and so beyond me? And I think we all do that, Have you always felt confident about technology or?
Absolutely not. No, I'm totally with you. I think when you were at school, did you have any access to sort of more engineering sides of things, or in terms of like
It's okay.
In terms of like, I don't know, sort of recording or any engineering side, like did you have any courses or classes that were?
Yeah, we did. And actually the boys, I was the only girl, but the boys in my class were absolutely brilliant, and they've gone on to produce Little Mix. So I can hear their influence, and they were doing, they were jazz trained, they were classically trained, they were highly, highly trained, but they were into making really noisy drum and bass.
Okay.
And they were brilliant. They were funny. They were great, actually. I really like, and it's one of those things that it was very evident that they wanted to go off into commercial pop. And it was very evident even at 16, I had already discovered Laurie Anderson and Philip Glass and this contemporary classical thing. It was so obvious which direction that we were all going in. And we've actually gone on to succeed on our own terms in our own ways, which is an amazing thing to be able to say. But yeah, they were great. But I think manuals used to really scare me. So I love the world of YouTube. And the YouTube tutorial, I'm really like into that. I think it's really democratized the process. And yeah, I started performing at film premieres and stuff when I was a teenager, and I had a setup. I just convinced myself it was too hard. It was, the internet was just up and running then. So, and we didn't even have that much access to the internet. I think that's never really been discussed, that there's a generation who were there as teenagers at the beginning of the internet, but it wasn't just dial-up modem. It was actually really expensive. Only certain kinds of households could afford it,
Yeah.
So, and I found manuals really scary, which I think like more and more, like I'm more into spreadsheets, and like I just, thankfully that has gone out of the window. But did you feel supported in your learning environment to really learn about all of this stuff?
Definitely. I think the reason I asked about your school background and stuff, because I was just curious as well, because So I went to an all-girls school until I was 15, 16, until college. And I don't know, I mean, personally, I'm not really sure about the idea of separating, in schools and
genders.
Pardon?
Separating genders.
I don't know. I mean, that was the only experience I had at school, so I can't really compare it to anything else. But I think I don't recall there being a huge amount of scope or, time to sort of explore your hobbies a bit more, I guess. And I think, so I didn't even know music technology was, well, obviously I knew it existed, but I didn't know that it was a possibility or that we could even explore that area. And when we got to choosing our A-levels, it came up on this syllabus and I was like, oh, what is this? Like, and it kind of really made me curious. And then I went to the open day for our sixth form and I realized that it was incredibly, I hate to say basic, but it was just there wasn't a huge amount of energy that was put into that particular course. And I just thought it might be worth exploring somewhere else and seeing what other facilities there are. Just before I really decided to move on to it was basically the same school. I was at college at the same school.
Right, yeah.
And then a friend of ours mentioned Reigate College and I went to their open day and oh my God, it was like, it was completely different world. They had 2 studios, they had a drum room, they had all this equipment. At the time they had an analog desk, but unfortunately when I joined, they'd got rid of that and they'd moved more into digital recording, which is still amazing. But it was just all this access to all these microphones, and it just felt really, I don't know, I just was so inspired just by being there for that open day. That was like, this is what I want to do. And there were about 12 of us in the class in the year group, largely guys. There were 4 of us, I think, girls, maybe more, maybe 4 or 5 in our year group. But the thing is, that I think that was also the first experience in education where there were both girls and guys in the same room, but it was very equal. There was everyone was really supportive of each other. You didn't really feel the disparity, the gender disparity or anything at all. It was very, it was very supportive and equal, I thought. So that was really, really good experience. And that was from 16 to 18.
Yeah.
So those were really important years for me, I think.
Yeah. That's really interesting because I think obviously we're really looking at gender and representation and all kinds of issues at the moment, especially in the music industry. And I have to say that the actual men that I've actually worked with, so the producers, the engineers, the people that I've toured with, have all been totally brilliant. The people involved in the actual process, it's more on the industry side where there's just a whole bunch of weirdness and all these kind of made up rules, which are all to do with basically people not believing that they can make a profit off it, and that's what it boils down to. But when it comes down to producers, especially producers and engineers and mixers, and I've had a really formidable experience. And I think because I've had such an unusual journey, the reason that people want to take me on professionally is because they believe in it, and they know that I'm coming from a very indie background. They know that it's very, actually, like, it looks really epic and sounds epic, but it's made from a completely DIY perspective. So when people work with me, it's because they actually really believe in who I am and what I'm doing. And I feel that that's been another very different. I feel that when it's come to journalists, or like when it's come to certain contexts, I've definitely felt the full weight of sexism. But in the actual making of the work, felt nothing but absolute respect, and still on. Have you had a similar?
Totally, yeah, absolutely. And I'm completely with you. I think when I was at uni, I feel like I studied engineering at uni, and there was 30 of us in our year. So every year there was about 30 people. And again, I think there were maybe 24 guys and 6 girls. But we were all very, we all just felt really equal and mutual respect for each other. We all helped each other out. And I think, luckily, I always bump into course mates when we're doing work things. A lot of them went on to work in studios in London, and such a small world, isn't it? Anyway, like this music industry, and you always bump into friends and extended friends. And I think there's something really special about the music scene here, that it just feels very inclusive, and especially in the creative side, you know, like you say, producers and engineers and artists and musicians. And so I've had nothing but really magic experiences with our friends, which has been really, really nice. Of course, yes, I think there has been some times where I felt a little uncomfortable in terms of, you know, being sort of, what's the word, you know, being judged for, you know, they're thinking, oh, you know, it's actually more in the live environment, I would say, not with my colleagues, because I love every one of them and we've all got mutual respect for each other. It's more that, say, for example, we've arrived at a venue and the local crew perhaps have been a little judgmental on what they believe I can do. So that's something that I've sort of struggled with a little. You know, it's never gotten in the way, but I just, you know, it's very, you felt that energy, you know, and that still needs a lot of work. And there's obviously a lot of areas that need a lot of work, but I think just from our chat just now, it feels like we've both been quite lucky in our circles of friends, and music should be a very, you know, it should be a very warming and loving experience. Like it should be something that we can, you know, it's an exchange of creative energy, I guess, and if it comes from a good place, then that's when you make the best. You make the best of the situation, and something happens, you know, something magic happens, hopefully. Yeah,
I think it depends. I think there's more pressure if you've got some massive deal and a whole bunch of money and pressure and people involved and people in, you know, that there's, I think in a way, coming from a very DIY, coming from a very indie sensibility and making all of this stuff, such a different experience, because you're coming from the outside, you know, you're not coming from the inside, you're not coming from like the label, the indie major system. I think within that system there's a lot of weirdness, because there's just everybody's just trying to make sure that they keep their job and they get their rent paid, or like or whatever. But coming from the really kind of DIY sensibility, or just even like the really big artists that I've worked with, it's because they really saw something of value on a really holistic level, rather than they're trying to get with me because, you know, like they think that it's going to be good for their career or something. I think that's when the problems start.
Yeah.
But speaking of the amazing artists that you've worked with, we'll talk about them all. But how did you get into session work and into touring work? Because you've toured with and worked with some incredible acts and some incredible artists.
Well, I'm just very lucky that they allowed me to be part of the group. To be honest with you, and I know this is I've always wondered if this is something that, because it doesn't sound like I don't know, what am I trying to say? Basically, I guess a lot of people that I work with have had a clear vision from the beginning, and the reality is actually I've just sort of known that I wanted to work in music, but I never really had a clear path. So it always sounds like I've kind of, you know, it's not like I just wish it sounded like, you know, I thought about it a bit more and I'd gone from A to Z and, you know, followed a particular path. But I actually just didn't even know that session playing was a career option at all. Like I didn't know it was a thing until I left uni, and I was in a band at the time with a friend. Do you remember Climarama? Did you ever come to?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So I was in a band with our friend William Robertson, who was one of the family. You know, I guess everyone knew each other in that club, didn't they? But so we were playing a gig together in London, and his friend came to one of the shows, and he was a session drummer. He is a session drummer still, an amazing session drummer. And he just said, "Oh, you know, I really enjoyed your gig. Have you ever thought about doing session playing before?" And didn't really know what it was. I kind of, you know, I asked him a lot of questions, and he set up an audition for me. And luckily, I got the gig. So I ended up touring with this artist for maybe a few months. It was like quite a short, like a radio tour around the UK, and we did a festival in Germany, and that was my first taste of what it was like to work in that world. And I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was really insightful. I learned a lot from everyone, and I thought I'd love to try this again or continue it in a different way. But I also had a full-time job at the time. So I was working at a label and working for a festival and doing other bits and pieces. So I guess I could never really fully commit to doing it all, per se. I always had it as something I loved doing, but I could dip in and out every now and again. But then I think a few years down the line, I started playing with my friend Georgia, who I met through the festival, and we're really, really good friends. I feel like she's like my sister. But we started playing 5 years or so ago, I think 2015, around then. So it was when her first EP came out, and we were sort of building her show together. And then it got to the point where I was getting quite busy, and I realised I really wanted to be fully committed, and I don't want to sort of, be half there and then half having to work while we're on the road. And I felt like I wanted to put all my energy in one place. So I ended up leaving my job and going freelance. And that gave me more time to focus on more of the creative side. Not that the job before wasn't creative, but it was more of a marketing role, and I just learned so much from touring with G. And then through G, I met Kae Tempest, and they took me on the road. And it was just such a lovely energy. So Kae's touring family are all friends, like from a very young, they all went to school together or they met on the road. Like Kae and Archie, who's Kae's MIDI tech, they were in a band together before. So it was a really lovely family vibe. So yeah, so kind of, I guess it's always through connections with friends, and things like that. Which I think is really, really nice and comfortable and really special.
Yeah, well, you were that first initial. I mean, I think that Kae Tempest is they're a legendary voice. Although that word legendary is really loaded, I think that they are an iconoclast in their own right. Just that novel that they wrote and all of the poetry, and there was one presentation for the BBC. I think it was a part of a live performance art thing. I think it was called Live Now. I think because I tried to apply for the same project and didn't get it, but it was so amazing to see Kae and you and everyone live. But that was unbelievable. I mean, it must have felt unbelievable to feel that kind of energy, that their first flowering. Of course, because they've gone on to, progress even more as a poet and as a force for change. Yeah, I guess I'm trying to say that Kae Tempest is a complete force for change.
I totally agree.
It must be. What does it feel like to be on stage with them, especially in that first, when the novel came out and the poetry book came out, that first flowering of their album? What did that feel like as a keyboard player?
Oh goodness, I don't know how to summarize the how much I've learned from Kae and just being around them, and I respect them so much. I guess we all feel the same towards Kae because their work is so prolific and beautiful and really comes from the heart, and you can just feel that from their words. It's really beautiful. I joined the team a few years later, I think. So Kae had already been in a band. They'd released their novel. Georgia used to be in Kae's band, which is how I met Kae. Yeah, so Georgia was Kae's drummer for a while, and Georgia and Kae had known each other for a long time too. So I think their families know each other very well. So I joined in 2017, so it was probably a few years into their touring, their touring career, you know what I mean? Like a few years after they'd already started touring their record. But yeah, I really learned so much from every single person in the team. It's quite a small unit, but that's what makes it also so special. Everyone is so invested, everyone has so much love for the project, which of course we all do. And it's a very creative way, the approach to the show. I don't think I've ever been involved in a live show like it before. The way that it's programmed. So Archie, who I mentioned earlier, is an incredible tech, and I think Archie and Dan Carey, who's Kae's producer, I think they work together a lot to put together this live show experience where I think basically every show was quite different in that even though the parts and the sounds and the words are largely the same, it really depends on Kae's flow as well. So sometimes, the rhythm could be different. It's all free flow. There's no tempo or there's no click or anything like that. So obviously in the samples that I'm triggering, there is an element of the pulse, but we sort of mould the show around Kae's words. So
wow,
the length of it can be quite different sometimes, or sometimes we'll segue and do something else. It's quite fluid in that way, and it's really fun to play. Like every time I come off stage with Kae, I'm beaming because it's such a different experience every night. Yeah.
So it's almost like jazz improv then. I think there's a common misunderstanding, I think especially with a lot of live shows now, that, you just press a button and then it's all just music, it all just runs. And it can be. I mean, I've seen full bands on stage and it's like, dude, that is way too much of a produced sound. Like, it's fine. They're and you know what? I think that's also an approach. I think people are so used to production of a high finish that that's fine if a band want to recreate that for their live experience and they feel that's the most authentic way of bringing that across. Personally, I don't really have a problem with that. I used to feel very self-conscious about that, and now I think, well, it's just an approach. But so that's really interesting. So you're live triggering all of these samples and put all off Novation, or I think I've noticed that you've had Novation stuff on stage. Do you use Novation or do you use any other programs? Or
so we mainly work on Ableton.
Right.
Ableton houses all the samples, and Dan and Archie have basically cut up all the elements. So it's kind of, it's very fluid in that we can pair things with other things and improv, I guess, in a way. Obviously there is a certain element of structure in a song, and that these parts come in at a certain time, but also it's very free to experiment a bit more. And on top of that, we have a synthesizer and an audio stage set up so we can play other sounds over the top. So yeah, it's fun. It's very freeing, there's no backing track. It's just you can sort of hold it to whatever the situation is,
And so, obviously I have to talk a little bit about Ed O'Brien, lol. What's it like performing with Ed?
Oh, it's very dreamy. I think, I have so much respect for Ed as well, and he's really, it's amazing to absorb his, obviously he's got such an amazing history of his work, and it's really magic to be able to experience, his new solo career as well. To be fair, I haven't been playing with him very long, so Ed's album came out in May, I think, during lockdown. Such a shame it came out during lockdown because we had plans to tour in the States and things like that, but it is what it is, and hopefully we'll be able to do that sometime soon. So in Ed's the band, there's 5 of us. There's Ed, Ross the guitarist, Dish the bassist, Falcon the drummer, and me. And I feel very privileged to be able to play together with them. It's such an amazing band to play with, and it's been really good fun. And again, there's not that this should be a surprise, I guess, in live shows at all, but we don't have a track or anything like that. It's all very live, and we just kind of, use the energy of, I think, it's important to sort of feel the energy at the time, and that sort of dictates how it goes on stage, I guess.
I heard Ed on a podcast, I can't remember which one it was. I think it was Loud and Quiet.
Okay,
Talking about feminism and Black Lives Matter and trans issues, and it just the kindness that comes out, that his self-awareness and his kindness, it's just like so inspiring, and we just need more men who are saying things like that, expressing it in the way, like you can hear how he's processing the issues of the day. You know, it's not just glib. I mean, not that I think it would be anyway, but you can really hear how he's taking in how the world is changing, how people need to respond to certain issues, how men need to talk about certain things. And it's just so inspiring. It's just like, God, thank God.
Yeah, I totally
God,
agree.
there is somebody who is just so kind and sensitive about this stuff. And so what projects have you been working on during lockdown?
I've been lucky to do some collaborative projects with some friends that I've been meaning to do for a while. So some remixes and things like that as well. The main thing actually that I've just come back from that we were talking about earlier is it's a project for WOMAD. Well, it's Real World Studios and WOMAD, and unfortunately they couldn't run the festival this year, so they're running an online immersive experience where listeners can put headphones on and be immersed in this hopefully, nature environment perhaps. So Ollie, who's the head engineer at Real World, is a good friend, and he very kindly invited me to come and do one of their slots. Like, it's like an online festival, so it's one of the performances, I guess. And I thought it would be fun to do some binaural recording of nature. So I went up the day before and we took a dummy head out into the forest and to the lakes and recorded some nature sounds. Because I guess that's one thing as well. I think, I don't know if you feel the same, but during lockdown, we've all had to slow down so much, but also because we can't really go anywhere, we're hopefully connecting more with the nature around us and just trying to absorb as much of, just all the beautiful things the world has to offer, really. I think that we're really lucky here. So I live in Hackney and we have the marshes down the road, and it's just such a beautiful place. So I found that I'm taking more walks and getting to know this neighbourhood better, and I wanted to incorporate that a lot into the immersive concert. So we did some research and went down to East Harptree in the car, to Tree Valley. I think the area is called the Mendip Hills. It's really beautiful. So I didn't know. So it said Mendip Hills AONB, and apparently that means an area of outstanding natural beauty. So I think it's like a protected area. So it was very lucky to spend a day there with Katie, who's one of the engineers at Real World, and we did some final recordings and took it back and put that on top of the music that I'd made for the festival. And so that's been something that we've been working on, and I got back yesterday, so I think we've wrapped the project hopefully, and I think it's coming out in September sometime.
So this will be out in September, and people can find out about it on your website. Is that hinakoomori.com?
Yes, I think it will be on the WOMAD website perhaps.
Okay. Yes.
I could send you a link to, But I think it'll be posted on the WOMAD website somewhere. But there's some incredible artists involved, and I'm so excited to hear everyone's.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love Real World Studios. I mean, I would love to. I'd love to visit there one day. I think I have.
Well, you must. You should definitely do something there. You'd love it. It's so amazing.
Yeah, God, I'd love that. I might actually. To round off the Witch podcast, who is your favourite woman in tech? They can be from the past or the present, or maybe even from the future.
Oh, future. I'm going to say Wendy Carlos. I mean,
excellent choice.
I don't think I really need to say any more, but what an incredibly inspiring, incredibly inspiring person. Like, all of Wendy's output was just, beautiful, and I feel like I've got a lot to learn from everything Wendy's done.
Yeah, well, it's just incredible to think that especially from the earlier records, every one of those notes was cut individually and then reassembled together, and all of the work. I mean, Wendy Carlos completely changed my life. All of the work she did with Stanley Kubrick, just the whole Wendy Fantasia. In fact, I have a box set somewhere in my collection, and there's some recorded audio of her being interviewed talking about the Well-Tempered Clavier. So I think I need to get that off the shelf
Yeah, God.
and give it a listen to, because she is just so phenomenal. Well, thank you so much, Hinako, and
Thank you so much for having me.
I can't wait to see you in real life. Thank you.
I cannot wait. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Hinako, for this week's interview. And thank you all for tuning in and subscribing. Thanks to The Rattle for all of their technical support on this podcast. You can find out more about Witch at Instagram, Facebook and twitter.com/witch. You can go to witch.com to find out news and updates and to sign up to our monthly newsletter. Until next time, thanks and goodbye.